The eggs were still frying when Amina got the call. She remembers that detail not because it matters, but because the mind holds strange things when life is about to break open. The oil was popping softly in the pan. The radio in the corner was playing something low and old. Outside, Nakuru was doing what it always did on a Tuesday morning, moving slowly, unhurried, like it had nowhere important to be.
Some people spend their whole life loving others quietly, and nobody noticed the cost until much later. Today's story is about sacrifice, motherhood, family, and the kind of heartbreak that does not happen loudly. If you have ever carried people on your back while pretending you are okay, this story will stay with you.
Then her phone rang. It was Nurse Wanjiku from Rift Valley Provincial General Hospital. Her voice was careful in that way that nurses are trained to be careful, not cold, but measured, controlled. Like someone carrying a heavy thing and trying not to drop it. Are you the sister of Zawadi Mutoni? Amina turned off the stove. She did not know why she did that first. Maybe some part of her already understood that whatever came next, she would not be eaten. Zawadi was 27 years old when she died. She had gone in for a normal delivery, or what everyone thought was normal. The pregnancy had been difficult from the 5th month, but Zawadi laughed about it the way she laughed about everything. She called her swollen ankles her government property and complained about them loudly to anyone who would listen. She had painted the small wooden cot in her one-room house in Milimani herself, using a brush she borrowed from a neighbor and blue paint she bought in a small tin from the hardware shop down the road. She was ready to be a mother. But the body does not always cooperate with readiness. Something went wrong in that delivery room, something medical, something sudden, and by the time Amina ran through the hospital corridor with her wrapper still tied from the house, Zawadi was already gone. The baby was alive, a boy, tiny and wrinkled, and completely unaware that he had just entered the world alone. Amina stood at the nursery window and looked at him for a long time. He was the third. Zawadi already had 2 children before this one, Tiara, who was 6, quiet and watchful with her mother's eyes. And Jaden, who was 4, loud and restless, and always asking questions that had no easy answers. Their father, Baraka, had left when Zawadi's pregnancy with Jaden was barely showing. He had packed a bag one Thursday and said he was going to Mombasa for work. He never came back. No call, no letter, nothing, just absence, which is its own kind of cruelty. So Zawadi had been raising Tiara and Jaden alone. And now there was this new baby, this boy with his fists curled tight and his eyes shut against the world, and no mother and no father, and nobody except Amina standing at that glass window with tears running silently down her face. She named him Seun. It was the name Zawadi had written on a small piece of paper inside her hospital bag. Amina found it later, folded between a nightgown and a bar of soap. Just the name and nothing else. Like Zawadi had known, on some level, that she would not be there to say it herself. Amina was 31 at the time. She worked as a nutritionist at a community health center in Nakuru town. She had a small but neat 2-room apartment, a bicycle she used on dry days, and a quiet, careful plan to save enough money by 35 to build a small house on the plot her father had left her in their home village of Subukia. She also had someone, a man named Odiambo, steady, gentle, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked, and remembered how she liked her tea. They had been together for 2 years. They were not engaged, but the conversation had started, slowly, carefully, the way Amina did everything. When she brought the 3 children home, Odiambo came to help. He carried boxes. He assembled the small cot. He stayed for dinner and played with Tiara until the little girl laughed for the first time since her mother died. But 3 weeks later, he sat across from Amina at that same table and said something she has never forgotten. Amina, I love you, but I did not plan for 3 children. This is not what I signed up for. He was not shouting. He was not cruel. He said it the way someone says something they have rehearsed quietly with regret, but with decision already made underneath the words. Amina looked at him for a moment. Then she said, I know. And that was the end of that. She cried for him later, alone in the bathroom with the tap running so the children would not hear. But she did not ask him to stay, because she already knew in that deep and wordless place where real decisions live that she had already chosen. She had chosen the moment she stood at that nursery window. The years that followed were not dramatic. They were just hard. Hard in the way that Tuesday mornings are hard. Hard in the way that school fees and hospital visits and cooking dinner when you are exhausted are hard. Not the kind of hard that looks impressive from the outside. The invisible kind. Amina gave up the Subukia plot, sold it to a cousin for 230,000 shillings when Sin was 8 months old and her savings had run dry. The money covered rent, diapers, formula, and Tiara's school uniform. It disappeared faster than it came. She applied for a second job. She got a part-time position doing nutrition assessments for a church-based feeding program on Saturdays. She worked 6 days a week for 4 years without complaints. Tiara and Jaden called her Auntie Amina. She never asked them to call her anything else. She understood that names carry memory, and she did not want to erase Zawadi. She kept a framed photograph of her sister on the wall above the television, smiling, full, alive. She made sure the children saw it every day. But soon, little soon, who had never known any other face to wake up to, called her mama from the time he could talk. And Amina let him. By the time Tiara was 17, she was sharp and focused, studying hard for her KCSE exams. Jaden was 15 and difficult in the way 15-year-old boys are difficult, pushing, testing, pulling away. Soon was 11 and still soft, still close to Amina, still the one who saved her the last piece of mandazi without being told. From the outside, it looked like a family. A small, tired, imperfect family, but a family. What nobody saw was how thin Amina had become. Not in her body though, that too, but in herself. In the way she no longer had hobbies. In the way she stopped visiting her friends one by one. Not because they fought, but because there was simply no time. In the way she sometimes stood in the kitchen after the children were asleep and just stared at the wall, not thinking about anything, just standing there. She had given so much of herself that she had forgotten to check whether anything was left. And then the year Jaden turned 22, something shifted. It started small. A comment here, a cold look there. Jaden began coming home late, without explanation. He started taking calls in the other room, dropping his voice to a murmur when Amina walked past. He became distant in a way that felt different from teenage distance, more deliberate, more pointed. Amina noticed, but she told herself it was stress. A young man finding himself. She had learned, over the years, to explain away the things that frightened her. She should have listened to the fear. Because one evening, Jaden came home with a name on his lips that Amina had not heard in almost 20 years. Baraka. He said it casually, standing in the kitchen doorway, like he was mentioning the weather. I spoke to our father today. Amina's hands went still on the counter. She did not turn around immediately. She stood with her back to him, her hands flat on the cold formica, and she breathed in, out. When she finally turned, Jaden was already walking away. That night, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling with Nakuru quiet outside her window, Amina felt something cold move through her chest. Not anger, not even fear, just the slow, sinking recognition that something had just begun and that whatever it was not going to end gently. Before we continue this story,
What hurts the most is that stories like this are not rare. They are happening quietly in homes all over the world.
drop your country in the comment section. Let us know where you are watching from. You would be surprised how many people across the world are going through something very close to this. Baraka had not changed. That was the first thing Amina thought when she finally saw him standing outside her door one Saturday morning, dressed in a pressed shirt, hair cut clean, holding a paper bag of fruits like he was visiting a neighbor. He looked comfortable, settled, like a man who had long ago made peace with the things he had walked away from. Amina stood in the doorway and said nothing. Amina, he said, smiling carefully, I just want to talk. She let him in, not because she trusted him, but because Tiara and Jaden were in the sitting room watching and she did not want to perform a fight in front of them. She had always protected them from noise. She was still doing it, even now, even for the man who had caused so much of the silence they grew up in. Baraka sat down and spoke for almost an hour. He talked about how he had been in Kisumu all these years, how he had struggled, how he had found faith, found stability, found himself. He talked about his regrets smoothly, rehearsed, the way a man talks about regrets when he has practiced them until they sound real. He said he wanted to be present now, to know his children, to make things right. He did not once mention Zawadi's name. Amina noticed that. She filed it away in that quiet part of her mind where she kept things she was not ready to speak yet. And after that visit, Baraka began calling Jaden regularly. And Jaden changed, not overnight, gradually, the way a river changes the shape of a stone. He started spending weekends in Kisumu. He came back with new clothes, new opinions, new silences. Tiara was more careful. She had her mother's caution that watching quality, but even she began warming to Baraka after he sent money for her college application fees without being asked. It was a small gesture, but it was calculated. Because while Baraka was building himself up in their eyes, he was quietly doing something else. He was planting a story, a version of the past where he was not the man who left, but a man who was pushed out. A version where Zawadi was complicated, where Amina was controlling, where the land in Subukia, Amina's father's land, Amina's inheritance had somehow been taken from the children who deserved it. He never said it loudly. He didn't need to. He just asked questions. Soft questions over jollof rice and Tosca in Kisumu. Did your auntie ever tell you about the land? Did she show you where the money went? Did she ever let you see documents? Questions are more dangerous than accusations because questions make you feel like you found the answer yourself. The confrontation came on a Sunday. Amina had cooked rice, beef stew, the kind of meal she made when she wanted the house to feel full. She was still at the stove when Jaden walked in, sat at the table, and said, we need to talk about the Subukia plot. Tiara was sitting across from him. Sean was not in the room. Amina turned slowly. Jaden was not shouting. That was the thing. He was completely calm, which was somehow worse. He said that their father had told them the land belonged to their mother, that it should have been passed to them, that Amina had sold it without their knowledge or permission. Amina set down the wooden spoon. She went to her bedroom, She came back with a manila envelope, old, soft at the edges, held together with a rubber band. Inside were receipts, years of receipts, school fees, hospital bills, rent, formula. Tiara secondary school uniform from 2014. Jaden's mathematics tuition from 2016. Son's vaccination records. She laid them on the table, quietly, one by one. That land paid for your lives, she said. Every shilling. Jaden looked at the papers. Then he said, we are not saying you didn't take care of us. He paused. We are saying the land was not yours to sell. Something in Amina's face went very still. She looked at Tiara, who was staring at the table. She looked at Jaden, who held her gaze, but only just, and then soon appeared in the doorway, drawn by the silence, and when he saw his mother's face, he took a small step backward, like the air in the room had changed, and he could feel it. Amina did not cry. Not there. She picked up the receipts. She put them back in the envelope. She went to her bedroom, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of her bed. Through the thin wall, she could hear Jaden talking again, lower now, less certain. She sat there until the sound stopped, until she heard the front door open and close, until the house went quiet. Then she lay back on the bed, still dressed, still in her kitchen slippers, and she looked at the ceiling for a very long time. Okay. She left the house 2 weeks later. Not dramatically. She did not throw things or give speeches. She packed 2 bags across 3 mornings, a little at a time, so it would not feel like a leaving. She arranged for a friend to take over the rent. She made sure the fridge was full. She made sure Sen's school fees were paid for the term. Then she went back to a single room in a quiet part of Nakuru town, near the market, where the mornings smelled like mandazi, and the evenings were cool, and the walls were thin, but the silence was hers. Baraka was gone again by December. The calls to Kisumu stopped connecting. The new clothes stopped coming. The man who had presented himself as a father revealed himself once again as a visitor, there for the season, gone when it turned cold. Jaden sat with that for a long time, and then one evening he called Amina. She let it ring 3 times before she picked up, not out of cruelty, just because she needed those 3 rings to prepare herself. He didn't apologize immediately. He started slowly, talking around it, asking how she was, asking about her work, asking about nothing. And then his voice broke, just slightly, and he said, Auntie, the receipts. I went back and looked at the dates. Silence. The school fees, he said. That was the same year she sold the land. I did the maths. Amina closed her eyes. Jaden, she said, I know. He started to cry, then the kind of crying a young man does when he has been holding it too long, rough and uneven, like something tearing. Amina listened. She did not tell him it was fine. She did not say don't worry, because it was not fine, and she believed in telling the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. But she stayed on the phone. That was her answer, staying on the phone. Tiara came in person. She arrived one Saturday morning with a container of pilau she had cooked herself, Amina's recipe, the one she had learned standing in that kitchen as a teenager. She set it on the table without saying much. She sat across from Amina and looked at her hands. I don't know how to fix this, she said quietly. You don't have to fix it, Amina said. You just have to not do it again. Tiara nodded. Slowly, like someone writing something important into themselves. Seal never left. He had never understood fully what happened, only that something had broken and his mother had gone quiet in a way that scared him. He visited her every Saturday, without fail, brought her phone credits, sat with her, sometimes said nothing at all. He was 19 now, no longer the tiny wrinkled boy from the nursery window. But he still had that quality, that instinct to save the last piece of something for her. Some things, the years do not change. Amina still keeps the photograph of Zawadi on her wall, even in the new room. Even now, she looks at it sometimes in the mornings before the day begins, and she thinks not with bitterness, not anymore about what it costs to love people fully, about how love is not a debt that gets repaid, about how some people spend everything they have on others and end up with a single room and a framed photograph and receipts in an old manila envelope, and about how, even knowing all of that, she would probably do it again. Because that is the thing about people like Amina. The world does not quite deserve them, but it needs them. Quietly, constantly, without applause. It needs them very much.
There are people in this world whose love become the foundation everybody stand on. But nobody asks whether that foundation is cracking. Amina was one of those people.
If this story touched something in you, something you have felt but never said out loud, then you're already part of what this page is about. Like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Best Tales of Africa so you never miss a story. Turn on the notification bell because these stories come when you least expect them, and they are always worth your time. Your comments are read, every single one. You are not just a viewer here. This is Best Tales of Africa, and you are family.